You're an American citizen.
Yeah.
And you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans? You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation.
Stephen A. Smith has fired another blistering shot at the Democrats, and it's brutal to watch unfold today. When voices like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher are calling out their own side, it signals that something deeper may be going wrong. His sharp critique reminded many Americans why the Democrats struggled in recent elections. As always, hit the subscribe button, and let's begin. For context, let me play you this clip, then I'll follow with Stephen A.'s damning take.
I think that there were 2 officers who were facing lacerations on their face.
For prosecution of those who resulted them?
Look, I've seen the videos of this snowball fight. I think that it was a snowball fight.
Snowball fight or assaulting cops?
I think it's a combination of both. They're law enforcement. They're not engaging in a snowball fight with you. They don't want to be bothered. If they're law enforcement and that's not something that they were entertaining, then assault would be the way to go. Now, obviously, if you just hit them with some sort of snowball or whatever the case may be, I mean, you didn't harm them or anything. That's entirely different. So there's different levels of assault. But nevertheless,
well, you're not harmed until you're harmed.
But nevertheless, exactly. The act is the act itself. And the law enforcement wasn't capitulating to that kind of situation. Then we have to take that into consideration. And if they felt it was assault, then damn it was assault, plain and simple. But once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office.
What we witnessed in that video was a situation where harmless fun escalated into something far more serious. On one hand, many New Yorkers were simply enjoying themselves, taking advantage of heavy snowfall that transformed the city into a winter playground. People laughed, ran, and threw snowballs in what should have been an innocent moment of relief after days of brutal weather. But on the other hand, a troubling element quickly emerged. Some individuals deliberately targeted New York City Police Department officers, not out of playfulness, but with clear hostility that crossed a serious line, especially when officers were injured. This was no longer harmless fun. It became something much more serious. When Zoran Mamdani was asked whether those responsible would face consequences, he dismissed it as nothing more than a snowball fight. That response shocked many. Now listen closely as Stephen A. unleashes his response.
Once again, this is something that comes back to bite Mamdani because he wasn't considered the strongest supporter of the NYPD as he was running for office. When you listen to some of his rhetoric in the past, some of the things that he had said about the police didn't seem to be that keen on being supportive about them. I don't recall whether or not he was talking about defunding police, but I believe.
Oh yeah,
I believe he did say that. I believe he did say that. So because that's a reality. You know, when you see that kind of stuff, it sort of seems dismissive about concerns for law enforcement. And that is not a good position for him to be in, particularly when they're not getting raises or anything like that, because you don't have the money to take care of them, nor did you appear inclined to do so even if you did. So all of those things definitely work against him. And that's the kind of thing that can turn officers against you. And with all the problems that New Yorkers...
Stephen A. is absolutely direct in his assessment of the situation. During his campaign, Zoran Mamdani openly supported calls to defund the police. So his attempt to downplay this incident as harmless raises serious questions about consistency and accountability. When officers are visibly injured and deliberately targeted, dismissing it casually sends the wrong message to the public. It creates the impression that hostility toward law enforcement is acceptable or inconsequential. That's a dangerous precedent, especially in a city already grappling with public safety concerns. Critics argue this could be just the beginning if rhetoric continues to weaken respect for law enforcement. Today, it may be snowballs thrown at officers. Tomorrow, that same anger could escalate further. Once that line is crossed, restoring order becomes far more difficult for everyone involved.
You see this AOC Mamdani video in Spanish?
Hola.
Mi español no es el mejor.
No, no te preocupes, alcalde. Si su hijo o hija está cumpliendo 3 o 4 años en el 2026, usted puede registrarlos gratis en el programa Kinder 3 o Pre-Kinder de la ciudad de Nueva York. Pero debe registrarse el 27 de febrero, que es la fecha límite. Cualquier padre de la familia de la ciudad de Nueva York, sin importar su ocupación, ingreso o estatus migratorio, es elegible para registrar.
Meaning illegals. So they are talking about illegals, number one. Now, we live in Miami. We're in Miami right now. I hear more Spanish than English outside of this studio basically all day long. So I don't have a problem with Spanish or Spanish speakers. However, speaking in another language while encouraging people who are not legal citizens to get city services, that seems a bit much for me.
Many Americans are also asking a broader question. Where in the world are illegal immigrants automatically entitled to completely free health care without limitations? It's a serious concern, especially when the healthcare system is already under strain with long wait times, rising costs, and limited resources affecting citizens and legal residents alike. Expanding access without clear safeguards raises fears the system could become even more overwhelmed. Critics say these policies ignore long-term consequences and place additional pressure on an already struggling infrastructure. These concerns have intensified after years of frustration over border security under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which many believe allowed the situation to escalate. Now, with progressive leaders pushing similar ideas, critics worry the strain on public systems could grow even worse.
Can't knock that. What I would tell you is that if you're trying to cater to that particular audience, speaking their language doesn't hurt. So that's not a crime. You know, they're voted. There are folks in the Hispanic community that are voting, and when you talk in their language, it makes them a bit more receptive to you, in terms of wanting to listen to what you have to say. I mean, what parent doesn't want, you know, free preschool for 3-4-year-olds, et cetera, et cetera. But I always harken back, and it's very important that I bring this up, because I remember when some people asked me, when you became so moderate, somewhat of a centrist per se, when did that happen for you? And I can't remember the year, but I remember when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were in office. And I never forget, as long as I live, a reporter was talking, Dick Cheney, former Vice President of the United States, God rest his soul, he was talking to him about, the polls were showing blah, 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 blah. He looked at the report and said, so? And I was eating my cereal. I was like, what? Because I had never seen it. I had never.
Stephen A. believes it's time for leaders like Mamdani to reconsider aggressively progressive policies and move back toward the political center. In his view, that shift would not signal weakness, but awareness and strategic growth. Returning to the center could bring immediate backlash from the progressive base that helped elevate his profile. Some supporters may see it as a betrayal of core principles. However, Stephen A. argues that leadership is not about pleasing everyone in the moment. It's about positioning yourself for long-term credibility and broader appeal. By adopting a more balanced approach, leaders could attract moderates and independents who often decide elections. More importantly, such a shift could strengthen the party's chances heading into 2028, helping rebuild trust with skeptical voters.
A vice president do that before. The president, he said, so? And then he said, you didn't elect us to follow your lead. You elected us to lead, to do what we believe is in the best interest of this country. And that's exactly what we're doing. And then the reporter elaborated a little bit about something with Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. And she tried to accuse him of being against that. He said, I'm not against that at all. I'm against you asking the government to pay for it. And all of a sudden, it opened my eyes and reminded me what all of this is really, really about. Most people in this country have a live and let live attitude. Live your life, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the uproar about?
People elect leaders to lead with clarity, conviction, and direction. Increasingly, critics argue the Democratic National Committee appears reactive instead of proactive. Rather than setting the tone and guiding the conversation, the party often seems to adjust positions in response to pressure. Instead of standing firmly behind a consistent vision, critics say it risks creating the perception that it is driven more by appeasement than leadership. Over time, that perception can erode public trust and make messaging feel scattered and inconsistent. Strong leadership, they argue, requires balance, listening to all voices while maintaining principles that serve the entire electorate.
Is about the fact that you're going into the pockets of the American people and asking them to subsidize it. And when you do that, now you've got them up in a tizzy.
Yep.
Because you're saying this is where your taxpayer dollars is going to. And when that happens, all of a sudden, that gives everybody the right to speak up and say, wait a damn minute here. How is that possible? I know of a young lady that's a friend of mine that got in a car accident in LA and literally needed to be treated, etc. And her bill was very, very exorbitant when she got treated at the emergency room and stuff like that. And she was trying to get on the phone, get some assistance, etc., etc. They literally told her, if you were a migrant, it would be easier to take care of you. But the problem is that you're an American citizen, so you have to wait in line.
For taxpayers who have spent years contributing to the system, the idea that others may receive similar or expanded benefits without the same obligations feels unfair. It creates the impression that those who funded programs are being pushed aside while newcomers move to the front of the line. Whether fully accurate or not, that perception alone can spark outrage and erode public confidence. Critics argue the core issue is not compassion but balance, ensuring policies do not unintentionally sideline citizens. When people feel overlooked in systems they have supported for years, resentment and distrust grow.
You're an American citizen,
Yeah.
and you're being told you have to wait in line in the United States of America in favor of somebody who's not an American citizen, who crossed the border illegally, that is going to be treated better because it's a sanctuary city, that is LA, and a sanctuary state, that is California. How do you think that's going to vibe with most Americans?
This is why many Americans appear to be turning away from the Democratic Party. When voters feel ignored or believe their contributions are taken for granted, frustration builds quickly. The longer concerns go unaddressed, the more they risk reshaping future elections. For Democrats, the challenge is not just defending policies, but restoring confidence among voters who feel disconnected from the party's direction. Failure to respond could bring serious consequences at the ballot box. Many Americans are signaling that patience is running thin.
I don't care what city you in. I don't care what state you in. Basically, what nation you're from. If you are a native of that country and you're being told you have to wait because they're favoring somebody who's not a native, who crossed the border illegally, you're going to have a problem with that, no matter who you are or where you're from. So understanding those kind of things is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about common sense.
As Stephen A. put it, common sense matters. If you are a native-born citizen and you are told you must wait because someone who crossed the border illegally is being prioritized, you are likely to have a problem with that. Regardless of city, state, or background, that perception creates frustration. Understanding those concerns, he argues, is simply about recognizing basic fairness and common sense.
You can't have stuff like that happening and think that there's not going to be major noise and friction and polarization in the country when you let something like that happen. There is no way that that's going to fly. I think most Democrats know that. The problem is they've surrendered to the extreme progressive left because they're fearful that they will lose their power positions if they don't. I think that's what the problem is more so than anything else, and that's what's going on in our nation's capital.
Donald Trump built his political identity around putting America first. That message resonated with voters who felt ignored by traditional leadership. Supporters point to his tough stance on immigration, challenges to global trade norms, and aggressive trade negotiations as proof. Whether confronting China over trade imbalances or prioritizing American industries, Trump consistently framed his actions around protecting U.S. workers and sovereignty. For many voters, that clarity and unapologetic focus on national interest remain decisive factors. In the end, today's political climate highlights why frustration with the Democratic Party is mounting among many Americans. Some feel their needs are overlooked in favor of policies they believe prioritize illegal migrants or special interests. From healthcare to law enforcement, critics see a disconnect between contributions and benefits. Commentators like Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher have warned that ignoring everyday concerns could have long-term political consequences, including electoral losses. Meanwhile, figures like Donald Trump continue to gain support by emphasizing an America First approach focused on citizens' interests. For voters, leadership is not just about ideology. It is about accountability, balance, and decisions that align with national interest. On that note, we close today's video. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.